Well, I'm here with my bud and coworker and partner in crime, Tim Sorenson. And, these are conversations that I like to have because we're a little bit bored. And I mean, we got plenty to do here at the church, but
Yeah.
there's also things to talk about, things to dive into. And Tim, you were the first guy I thought about when I watched the documentary called Fire Festival.
Mhm.
For those with zero awareness, kind of uh, give us the cliff notes. What happened at the Fire Festival?
Well, yeah. So anybody listening, I'll give you two options. You either let us spoil it for you, or you can Wikipedia it or whatever, or stop what you're doing, go look it up on Netflix or Hulu. Essentially, I mean, some keywords I'm thinking of are a millennial train wreck. Like like if you ask anybody that's watched this, it is basically surrounding what ended up being a disaster. Was this young entrepreneur who we'll talk about had this idea for this huge festival on this island, and this documentary basically follows the plans or the lack thereof leading up to that. So basically, it was not done logistically well, but the show still attempted to go on. And this documentary just swirls all around that, the ins and outs, viewpoints of workers that realized this wasn't going anywhere. And I forget which one, if it's Netflix or Hulu, but it references it as fire fraud. And that's just because that's what it seemed like it was, a huge fraud. Like, this doesn't seem like a plan that went bad. This seems like uh, somebody was just scamming, didn't know what they were doing, but couldn't quit. So I'm excited to talk about it. I don't know if I described it well enough, but it's
Yeah,
just like,
so a little gander on Wikipedia says Fire Festival was a fraudulent luxury music festival founded by Billy McFarland, CEO of Fyre Media, and rapper Ja Rule. And so, they set up this music festival supposedly in the Bahamas.
yeah, Exuma, yeah, the Bahamas.
Okay, some Caribbean island that was it was marketed as one of the islands owned by Pablo Escobar, but then that redirected. They had to go to a different island after that, right?
Well,
Legally.
yeah, that's kind of where, like, a lot of people think that this would have gone fine if, because that, like, once it was advertised as this is Pablo Escobar's island, somebody had a problem with it. I don't know if it was in the family, in the Escobar family, or on the island, but they're like, you can't do that. And had they just decided to be diplomatic, they probably could have worked something out. But it was crucial for them to be able to try to say that because of the awe factor, which, again, the way they marketed it was very impressive, and we'll get to that later, I'm sure. But yeah, so they wanted to do that, and then they had to switch locations because they weren't willing to budge on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we would both agree. Like these, there's two documentaries, one on Netflix, one on Hulu. I think you mentioned that, and they're both just. It's just hard. It's like a bad car wreck. It's hard. Like you don't want to watch, but you can't look away. And
Exactly.
it was so cringy and so crazy that so many, was it thousands and thousands of people your age, my age, millennials, that
Yeah.
ended up flying to this island for this music festival, spent tens of thousands of dollars to get there, and it never happened. It was a disaster.
Yeah, and for those that are watching us right now that are getting ready to turn it off, like, this is what caught me, was basically they're advertising these $10,000 villas. If you subscribe now or whatever, they're advertising these, and then in reality, when they show up, it is leftover tents from FEMA that they used for hurricane refugees. Like, you show up, you have forked over maybe $25,000, and you show up and you have a tent that is it's rained on because there was a rain right before, and you're like, oh, that's my luxury villa, is a soaked moldy FEMA tent. And like, so yeah, this big music concert, this guy had the dream, like Ja Rule, which I mean, relevant in the early 2000s, was they were on it. But for the church folk, this is like, it's being advertised. Imagine, I don't know, Tim Keller, Craig Rochelle, headlined by I don't know, Hillsong or Bethel or Chris Tomlin. Like, it's that big of a deal. Who's going to be there? And then nothing's there. Nothing's ready. Like, not only did the bands they advertised not show up, they didn't show up because they found it like it wasn't going to be suitable for us to have a high level performance. So yeah, I don't know if we want to go through it chronologically or whatever, or how you want to kind of go about this, but there's just so much to
I
this.
know. Yeah, we would recommend watching the documentaries. And I think what fascinated me the most about them uh, is just what they say about millennial culture, or
Mm-hmm.
about millennials in general. And it's funny, millennials can be the butt of a lot of jokes. We know we are millennials. Um,
Yes.
and we were talking about this earlier. There was all those partiers in Florida on the beach partying, and some news outlets are like, "Look at those bad millennials," and it's like, those aren't millennials. Those are
Yeah.
Gen Z. Millennials
Yeah.
are. What was the ages you said that millennials are right
So
now?
right now, and again, based on where you're going to look, in 2020, millennials are anywhere from 24 to 39. So, like your low end millennial has just finished college and trying to start an established career, and your high end millennial could be a parent of five or not. And I remember somebody tweeting in the beginning of all the coronavirus stuff, they're like, listen, the millennials aren't the ones partying on the beach. Like, we're the ones over here in our dark rooms having anxiety about what's going to happen. Like,
In our
we have
parents' basements. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So
So
we,
wait, you could be a millennial and be a grandparent.
wow. Yeah. Yeah. I think if I'm not mistaken, you and I were right in that mid-level millennial. Like, I think there's no doubt that we're millennials, but yeah, you could be a millennial grandparent. That's super weird.
And then, so one of the features of millennials is, you remember life before the smartphone, maybe before fast speed internet, like we had dial up growing
Oh
up.
yeah.
Um, you remember 9/11 pretty vividly.
That's
Most Gen
your
Zers do not have a memory of 9/11. Like, we all remember exactly where we were.
yeah,
Um,
if I'm not mistaken, the high school graduating class of 2019 would be the last official class that was alive during 9/11. Everyone else would only know it as a historical event. But I'll
Crazy.
also add that millennials remember Disney before it was before it got bad and before Disney Plus, which made it good again.
There you go. So what are these documentaries, this fire fraud, this disaster? What does it show you about millennials, millennial culture, and just uh, I guess, along with digital, um, what would you say, digital advertisement and some of those things?
Oh man, it made me think. So I'll start with the digital advertising. Their first ploy, so first off, this guy, there are aspects where he is very smart in what he does. So they essentially they call it free advertising. So what they do is they invite 100 social media influencers, which yeah, that's a job that I think rose up with millennials that I just think is weird. Like, you're popular, you can get the name out, and they have what they would call beautiful women kind of party on the beach. They would videotape it, and then they advertise that, and all of them would kind of, yeah, free advertisement. But what they did is they asked like 100 or 200 popular people to post an orange square at the same time and just tag Fire Festival. That's it. You at 5 o'clock on a Saturday post this orange square. So the demographic that follows all of them is just seeing these orange squares in their feed, and like, that is brilliant. Like, essentially their advertising was up here and their logistics was down here, and so they're moving forward. And
And wasn't the idea of the orange screen, so when you're scrolling, you
yeah,
typically might look at a picture for a second, or maybe a millisecond as you're scrolling, and the orange screen just bam
yeah, it
catches your
pops.
attention, and it stops people, like, what
Mm.
is that orange screen doing there? And then they start seeing it all over the place, from even like Kendall Jenner. They
Yeah.
paid her like $250,000 to post that orange square on her Instagram.
Yeah. No, a lot of big influencers, I think, now known as, Haley Bieber, I think, Bella Hadid, like a couple of these big names that have a huge following.
Wait,
Um,
I'm an idiot, but that's Justin Bieber's wife?
yeah, Haley Bieber. Now, I could be mistaken in what her involvement was, but I know her name got brought up. She had a
Oh.
different name, but I think she's now married to him. Fact check me if you're listening, because I could be wrong. But um, so yeah, that's the advertising was just brilliant. And these guys, they dreamed big. It was like, hey, we only allow positivity. People that kind of started raising red flags about this going downward, is they'd be like, listen, we're going to go a different direction with your role. Like, you're not going to help us anymore. Showed them the door, essentially. But back to your first question, what does this say about millennials? Like, yeah, if you are anti-millennial, or if maybe you think our generation just isn't carrying its weight, like, this is a video that's just going to fuel that fire. Like, again, vision is right here. Like, I think a lot of millennials, we can cast vision day and night. We have dreams, we can dream. But then just the whether it's a lack of humility or just a lack of, I don't know, communication, or a high douse of ignorance, essentially is what brought this crashing down. So what this says about millennials is not a lot of good, but I also don't know if this represents the majority of millennials. I mean, there's a lot of us busting our butts with college degrees, really trying hard. Yeah, I don't know what you're going to say. But.
Oh, I was going to say totally. And I think a lot of it is millennials, like you said, dream big, and they grew up as a generation that was totally encouraged to pursue your dreams, right? Follow your heart. Kind of like you mentioned Disney. Every Disney movie ever raised us, raised this generation to throw off tradition, throw off the culture, throw off whatever hinders, and pursue your secret, sacred self. Which is the way one theologian put it. And I think Fyre Festival was like a perfectly packaged image of that, like that ideal life that everyone is seeking. Like, lots of social media influence, beautiful women on Caribbean island beaches, bands, luxury. And the whole thing comes crashing down. Remember that scene where the bus drives up and everyone's got their phones, like they're so excited about what they're going to see, and they see the FEMA, the tents and the food. Do you see that picture of the sandwich, the cheese sandwich?
Yeah, that's the turning point. Like, when I finally saw it, I knew this was a flop, was the sandwich.
Totally. And like hundreds of thousands of dollars in social media posts to prop this thing up, and then one photo of this nasty sandwich brings the whole thing down.
Yeah, and what's really interesting with all that, like in these documentaries, they highlight, like, speaking of millennials, like the social reaction after all of this happened. Like, there were people that were like excited that basically rich millennials were getting theirs, and where you and I would argue, like, not all of them were millennials, they might have been Gen Zers, but like these rich kids, because these tabs were tens of thousands of dollars, like not anything you and I are ever going to go to. And so they're like, oh, rich millennials are just like finally getting what they deserve. And so that was a really, like, I don't know, because they were definitely scammed and victimized in that. So that's kind of the other side. You see this one millennial that's kind of planning it with this very ignorant dream big vision. And the victims are also people of the same generation.
Yeah, let's drill down on that for a second, because there is this, like I said earlier, the millennials can be the butt of a lot of jokes, and even to the point where, for some people, millennial means anybody that's young, and we're like, no, not anymore, it was a generation. Why do you think society often beat up on the millennials? What's that about?
Well, so I kind of personally, so when I think of millennials and maybe a negative light, I think of Twitter. I feel like millennials are probably...
That's a cesspool.
Probably the loudest congregation of people are millennials. I kind of have a joke that, like, social trends only just seem to last like a month and a half, because that's how long millennials really stay, I don't know, stay involved in something. Like, they're going to talk about something, they're going to be loud about it, but eventually we'll get bored and we'll move on. I kind of thought that would be the case on Twitter with coronavirus, but that ended up just being a completely different beast. But I think on Twitter, our generation is loud. Whether it's because we want to throw that one dart against the wall that makes us, Twitter famous. I just think, like, the desire for fame has gotten a lot easier. So we're all kind of pursuing it, and we're loud in that. So I think, and I think millennials are loud in a lot of good ways too, speaking up for stuff, like movement, women's rights, social rights. Like, obviously there's a lot of volume there. But I would guess that if you're in a crowd, the person that's going to annoy you first is the person with the bullhorn. And I think our generation oftentimes can be perceived as that. So
Definitely. I think, ever since Socrates, there's been this like, oh, the kids these days, like
yeah,
they're so like, there's some funny quotes that like you'll read a Socrates quote or something like that about the youth and
yeah.
how off they are. And you think that it's a modern day person saying it, but
Oh,
it's like written in 2000 BC. And
yeah.
it's just funny that perceptions of the youth have always been, um, poor.
Well, yeah, no, totally, which is weird. I mean, we look at our jobs where Christ is kind of like, no, like childlike faith is the key. Like that's actually kind of the goal. But like you said, everywhere else, it's just children kind of comes with a or the youth. And I don't know, maybe we took a little longer to grow up. I mean,
That's true.
you're probably seeing the age where people stay with their parents has gone up. I mean, I know for me, I think I lived with my parents till maybe like 23.
Yeah, 25 after I moved back from college and was working on my master's.
Right. And so people are like, oh, okay, so you weren't really to get on your feet. But like our mindset, like I think you're living with your parents if you're like, you're trying to be smart and save, or you're living with your parents because that's the only place you can afford. Like there's just these two different sides of the spectrum. But
I
yeah.
think one of the things about millennials too is the whole decision fatigue. So there are so many options. So say you go to the salad bar and there's 40 different kinds of salad dressings. And
Yeah.
you might know exactly what you want, but you might be like really overwhelmed. Or you
Hmm.
go to McDonald's and there's 400 different uh, order options, and that there's a paralysis there.
Yeah.
You try to get retirement accounts and there's um, you know 50 different options and you're like, forget it. I'm not even gonna do it. Um,
Right.
and so I think millennials were forced with like shouldering the burden of all those decisions. Uh,
Hmm.
go to the college of your dreams. Do, every graduation speech, right? Follow. I said that earlier, but like follow your heart. And I think that actually had an unintended side effect where maybe our parents and grandparents' generation had far fewer options, but it was way easier because of that. Like when you go into In-N-Out, you already know what you're going to get. It's
Yeah.
very simple and easy. And
Yeah. Not a lot of options.
exactly. And sometimes I think less options is better to a certain
Hmm.
extent.
No, yeah. Oh, no, totally. And I'm like, well, my easy answer is just get everything, but that seems to not work very well. But yeah, no, I totally think you're right. And there could be like this, I don't know. I don't think anybody really wants to fail. And so with those choices, you're like, all right, you see them as one avenue is going to be correct and the other avenues could be failure when that's not necessarily the reality. Like you could succeed in many different avenues. Um, unless you are at McDonald's and you choose the fish fillet. I just don't see that ever being a success. But like, yeah, I think we might have that perception. If I go to the wrong college, I've screwed everything up. When really we could find success a lot of places. So
Well, and not everyone might know this, but when we're not in coronavirus, Tim helps lead our young adult group at
mhm.
River Valley. And I'd say there's quite a bit of paralysis on like, who should I marry? Who should I date? Where should I go to college? Um,
Mhm.
jobs. I mean, we are bouncing all over the place with jobs, and that's not always millennials' fault. I mean, that sometimes it's the job market or just the way
Mhm.
things are, and it's just really interesting that um, that we're in that place. That I remember being like, man, what if I miss my spouse? Like, what if I don't get to meet my spouse because I didn't find the one?
Yeah.
And some of these things. And so I'm sure you've seen some of that with young adults. I mean, we're a unique breed.
Oh, yeah, we're very unique. And I think I was actually talking about this the other day with somebody, like in the young adults, you could, and I mean, in my world, young adults is 18 to 30. So unfortunately, I'm even not like a young adult anymore, but um, you could find somebody in the young adults group that is established. They have their career. They are making six figures, like they financially, they're great. Um, or you have a young adult who has gone to four schools, they've racked up student loan debt, they can't hold a job. Like, there's just such a wide array, and maybe this is any generation, but in the young adults, it just seems like, man. I remember I worked with somebody one time in another job, and it was around tax season. And I don't know, when it comes to work, I'm a loyalist. I work this job and then I work this job. But this person's like, I have had so many jobs. I have 9 W-2s to fill out for my taxes this year.
9 W-2s?
And
Oh
I'm like,
my gosh.
I would lose them all. And that made my head hurt just kind of thinking about that.
That is crazy. Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, Tim, what are some positive things that we've mentioned a few, but what are some maybe positive attributes of the millennial generation? We get beat up a lot, but there are some things. So like, as you think about it, the first thing I thought of, so yeah, sometimes the social media outrage is a negative thing. Other times, so I'm sure you saw the recent shooting of Ahmed Arbery. I totally butchered his name, but the guy in, was it Georgia?
Oh, yeah. Arbery.
Arbery, thank you.
Yeah.
I went blank there. But anyway, the two guys that shot him, like their whole case went pretty much missing, or the video went missing, and someone,
Right.
the guys didn't get arrested. Someone leaked the video, and 2 months later, the video gets leaked, and there's all this outrage, and it actually produces a positive thing.
Yes.
Because justice is, at least it seems like, gonna be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a positive thing, that there is a kind of social justice awareness in the best sense of that term, social justice.
Yes.
So I think sometimes millennials' sense of justice is a really good thing. It just gets misguided.
Yeah. No, and I think you used, I'm writing it down just because my memory's bad. A few of these things that kind of come to my mind in the best sense. So obviously any avenue can be used for good or bad. We've seen social justice in the best sense used by millennials in a great way, like you said, just really calling to action stuff. So in that, like, I think kind of tying with that, I think the millennial generation is not afraid to be advocates. I mean, again, I wasn't alive in other generations, but there's a lot of a desire to speak for the voiceless, kind of step up for those that can't. I mean, yeah, that's just right in line with what you said, in the best sense. Now, sometimes our blinders can be on, and maybe we're not necessarily always honoring in that, but in the best sense, I think there's advocates. And then some people might roll their eyes when I say this, because we are such a social media generation where you're like, you feel like you have a relationship, but it's on a screen. But I think we really desire like relationship. And
Yeah.
Although we could be considered one of the lonelier generations, I do think there's a sense of connection. Now, ultimately, I think you and I would agree, I find the best connection in the walls of a church, like face to face. That's why coronavirus has been so hard for a lot of people, because you don't get that face to face connection. But I do think that there's a desire for relationships, friendships, camaraderie in the millennial generation, in the best sense, because a lot of times we allow ourselves, like, we think we have a bunch of friends and really we don't. And I would say that's in the worst sense. But so those are the first two that come to my mind.
No, that's good. I think, I totally agree with those things. I think also millennials aren't afraid to question or challenge tradition. Now, we could keep saying in the best sense, or
Right.
like we can keep saying this over and over again, but sometimes that's a good thing to, like maybe our parents would be like, well, this is how we do things. Okay, why?
Yeah.
Well, that's how we've always done it. And millennials maybe often can have a more creative, or like, hey, let's not do that, or let's do this differently, or let's try new things. And many millennials have been the tech, kind of the tech creators.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Zuckerberg, creates Facebook, and Jack Dorsey creates Twitter, and I mean, there's these opportunities when we because there's ruts, there's grooves that people get stuck in, and habits, and it takes another generation to say, hey, hold on a second,
Mm-hmm.
Let's think differently about this. Let's do this differently. So I think that's a good value of millennials, that in some ways they're trailblazers.
Yeah, kind of like the Generation Y, except instead of the letter Y, it's like WHY. And yeah, I think on the other side of the coin from what I mentioned earlier, so millennials, oftentimes the most annoying person in the crowd is the one with the bullhorn. But if you are trying to get information out to the masses, you're going to ask the guy with the bullhorn. Like, and so I think that's another like kind of. I think this is in hindsight back to like the advocate or the information side of millennials, is that like, yeah, we have the bullhorn, and we want to, and we know how to relay information and like a sense of rally the troops pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Uh, so
No, and that's good. And what you just said made me think of all the churches going online, right? During
mhm.
this season. What percentage of the behind the scenes tech people are probably millennials?
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean,
Everyone, most of the River Valley. I mean, we got Ron Davis, who's I think he's an Xer, right?
right.
But like Natalie, Josh, everybody who's at work, kind of make the behind the scenes, the tech. That is a very millennial thing, and I mean, we laugh about how many times our parents and grandparents ask us for tech support. I was helping my grandma connect her Bluetooth yet again over a few days ago to her car,
Mhm.
but I think there's a value in that. That's not just those kids and their technology. I mean,
Right.
it is a tool, a really good tool. In the same way that the printing press was in the 1500s, that kind of expanded, and now we got books behind us that
Mhm.
because of that, and the Bible was translated, and so I think like millennials' fluency with technology, and Gen Z's even better, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe we'll get Joe on here one of these days to talk about Gen Z. Joe, one of our youth guys, because he's an expert there. Shout out to Joe.
Yeah, he's got a big heart. And I kind of remember with Gen Z, like I remember one time my phone didn't work, and I literally handed it to a group of 14-year-olds. And I said, my phone doesn't work and I don't know why. I walk away, I come back, and they hand it back and it's working. And it's just like where you said that millennials, like we remember the days of dial-up internet and what a flip phone is, and before cell phones, where like even that Gen Z or maybe younger millennials almost grow up and are born with the phone in their hand. I remember,
Totally. They call it digital native.
yeah,
So you
okay,
never knew life without them.
right.
You're two
Well,
years old and playing with an iPad.
well, because I mean, yeah, and this is another topic, but sometimes iPads, you almost need to pay it for a babysitter charge, because that's like, well, I don't know what to do. But I was interesting at one of our youth groups. I don't know if you were there. I asked, it was our high school group. I said, hey, everyone stand up. I'm going to say an age. And if you had your cell phone, like that was the first year you had a cell phone, sit down. There were 2 people standing when I was at 5 years old. And I'm just like, wow, 5 years old. And you guys had a cell phone. And, you know, for me, it was 17th birthday. I got a flip phone, had 25 cents a text. Like,
I remember those days.
yeah. So anyways, I don't know how I got rabbit trailed there, but
I remember texting my girlfriend on my mom's like flip phone 5 times, and it cost $1.25.
yeah, or like roaming charges. I remember I was in Portland talking to somebody in high school, and my mom's like, by the way, that's like a $230 phone bill. Just be careful. And I was like, what? Uh,
Dang.
oh, young love. Am I right?
Any other positive things that come to mind on millennials, or do we pretty much nail it?
Oh, I think we got a lot of them. I mean, I'm thinking of all the millennials I know, kind of. And again, there's there's learned traits. There's stuff that we've learned from our culture around us. Like I know at our church specifically, I'm just so blessed by the young millennials and then the older Gen Zs and how cohesive we seem. Um, but
This may seem this one thought. This might seem anecdotal, or like I don't have any evidence to back this up. But you mentioned relationship, and it seems like millennial parents are very relational with their kids.
yeah, um, I read, and I forget why. I think it was it was a Tim or Tom Rainier, kind of the one that talks about small churches or why people don't go to church. And he was saying that like millennial parents are some of the most hover helicopter parents, and it's almost like a pendulum swing. Why millennial parents seem to be that way? It's because maybe like, I think a lot of millennial parents are like latchkey kids, that, you know, mom had to work, so they came home from school, didn't see mom till 5 or 6. But they're like, when it comes to churches, millennial parents are some of the most involved with the services that'll be, you know, in children's ministry pertaining to their kids. And yeah, I'd be curious for research if like Instagram has anything to do with that, or social media, because I mean, you see millennial parents, you go to a millennial parent's Instagram, and it is just
I
kids.
know. I feel bad for those kids, and I don't know what generation they are because I don't think they're Z. They'll be the next generation. But
Right.
you do wonder, like, I mean, it was hard enough for me when I was my dad's sermon illustration all the time, you know? But, like, imagine if you've been posting about your kids for years, and they don't really get a say, you know? Like, they don't know. And so I always wonder, like, what some of the residual effects are later on. Although it is nice to have that, like, we have home videos on VHS, but
Yeah,
like these kids are going to have a, you know,
a
day by
hashtag.
day time, a timeline of like their whole existence.
Well, right. Like if I go over to my mom's for Thanksgiving dinner, we bust out the photo book to look at photos of me. But like now parents are going to be like, well, you've always been hashtag Tigo since you were 3. Like, here we go.
It's
It's kind of
amazing.
nice.
Yeah, there's pros and cons. I think time will tell on some of that stuff, but it does seem to me, yeah. So you're right about the helicopter parent. That can maybe be the the relational, or even like parent as best bud. Like that could be like the worst of it. And
Yeah.
you know, here 2 dudes that aren't parents yet,
Yeah.
with all the parenting advice. But you know, there is that, like, sociologically, you know,
Mhm.
more relational parents, which is a good thing. Or maybe those who came back from World War II weren't great parents. They provided financially, but they didn't really ever tell you they loved you. They didn't really ever ask about how you're feeling and doing. And
Right.
then, and these are generalizations, but then the
course.
millennial parents are like, hey, like, how's your inner life? What Enneagram number are you? You know, like,
Exactly.
how's your heart? And I think by and large, that is a good transition, that parents are more invested emotionally in their kids.
Yeah, and even like working with youth and stuff, when I am interacting with a helicopter parent, like at the end of the day, I'm like, well, like they care. And for the listeners that don't know, my wife is a first grade teacher, and the ones that she is, like, yeah, there could be helicopter parents that are asking a lot of questions, but they care and they're involved. And I think you kind of like you described like those, maybe the vet parents, like the older parents, like the emotionally absent, where millennials are trying to be very emotionally present. um that's like I think it's a good side of the coin, like they care, they're trying to in their own way show love. And I think, yeah, you make a very good point. Yeah, how are you? What's your Enneagram? I'm a 9, by the way. But yeah.
5. Yeah. Well, Tim, I mean, and we kind of diverted quite a bit from Fire Festival, but that's okay. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating to talk about millennials and how we're aging and some of the other generations that are coming up. And there's some major differences. Um, Anything else with Fire Festival, Instagram, social media? Um,
Well, yeah, and just a little bit as we're wrapping up, but like I found it fascinating. So obviously, the interesting part was the leading up to the festival, but then a lot of those documentaries actually talk about afterwards, and it like you totally see where people are pumped and they're stoked about it, and then afterwards, it's like, yeah, all these red flags, and it was just like it was almost heartbreaking to see some of these people that were just like the whistleblowers were essentially silenced, and just so many people were used
mm,
and disregarded. There's one specifically where um, the head guy of Fyre Festival, he kind of, it's a month or so afterwards, they're doing a video chat, and he's like, hey guys, like very very weird pseudo optimism, I guess, I don't know what you'd call it, but like, all right, we had a speed bump, but we want to rally the troops, we want to get more, like get some money, we want to try this again, and we're a family. And one of the interviews, the lady was like, family? Like, we're not a family. Like, the last year, you didn't treat me anything like a family. And so that was just very interesting to see. Most of the people, the wool had been removed from their eyes. They're like, man, this guy is, I don't know, wolf in sheep's clothing. He is a fraud. Even what he continues to do after Fyre Festival, which is now jail, but before that was just like, you're blown away. Like, you're waiting for it to all be like, just kidding. This was a joke. This didn't really happen. This was a Hollywood production, but it's not.
No self-awareness. Almost someone even called him sociopathic. Like it just seems like he had no regard for people's, the hundreds of thousands of dollars spent and the time and just everything.
Well, right. Yeah. I agree with you, where it's just like, do you not like, are you even like, do you have the mental capacity to think about others? And it was ignorant. I think what you said, not socially aware, not personally aware, was all like very accurate with this guy, and visionary for sure. Like definitely was intelligent in the sense of being able to generate things happening. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just there's like heartbreak to it, where some people were taken advantage of on that Bahamian island. But as you and I were talking about, it was really cool that GoFundMes have kind of been raised to support them, which I would guess that those GoFundMes were started by millennials.
Started and supported by millennials, probably, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one cool thing. A millennial might only have $10, but they're going to try to give about $9.50 of it to a cause that they seem worthwhile. And, but yeah, for those that are still listening, it's a worthwhile watch. Probably don't have young ones around. I mean, there's some very real, raw, like conversations that happen.
Yeah, there's some profanity, but I think that's the extent of the show.
Yeah. No, yeah, profanity for sure. And then each documentary, it's cool because it's the same topic but completely different viewpoints. One actually interviews the point guy of Fyre Festival, the other one does not. So yeah, it's a very interesting watch, especially as you said and what we've been talking about, kind of analyze one facet of the millennial culture. Because one thing we didn't even really talk about, but how that media like generated all that buzz. They essentially said like, we want people to feel like they're missing out on the biggest party of the year. And that's essentially the motor of them getting this happening. Like, oh, all the bigwigs there, you're missing out. You want to be a part of it. So
it's so interesting. And I know every conversation has to come back to Trump, but it seems like the same media forces that created this like buzz about Fyre Festival, like, yeah, this is awesome. And this was 2016, by the way, is the same media that love him or hate him created Donald Trump and his rise. And I think there's just so much with social media, Twitter, Instagram, and then the media like coming alongside those things that create some consequences that would not have normally happened without it.
Well, right. And yeah, again, trying to stay pretty like, not leaning one way or the other, love him or hate him. Like this president has, I think, changed the way that generations will view presidency. And through his activity on Twitter, like everybody every day is talking about politics. Like he's changed the way we look at politics, because I mean, in former presidencies, I don't think I was necessarily thinking about the president every single day, but because of all the activity and the interaction with social media and the buzz around it, it has definitely changed the way, good or bad, that we interact.
How old's Obama? Is he 50?
Tell you what, if you stall for 1 second, I will.
That's right. You could look it up. I think he's late. I think he's 50. The Obama campaign really capitalized on Facebook back then.
Yeah.
And that really helped him actually. So Trump isn't the first social media president.
No,
it was Obama. He's probably a Gen Xer.
Right. So he lands at the ripe old age of 58.
Oh, really? For some reason, I thought he was younger. Maybe 8 years in office. That's Yeah. No. So he would have been 40. Let's see, 8 years, 4 years ago. Yeah, 46 or so, like late 40s. Because he was one of the youngest, right? After JFK?
I would agree with you on that. My presidential history is a little...
yeah, me too.
Yeah, but anyways, so... and probably because I wasn't as involved in social media, like, maybe during the Obama era, I didn't quite realize that, but it just seems like social media is now a huge play. Like, I couldn't imagine a serious presidential candidate not having a social media.
Or
really,
any business, right? Any church, any, uh,
yeah,
I mean, it's just, it's unavoidable almost.
yeah. Which, kind of makes you wonder. I wonder how many church social media accounts were started in the last 2 months because of COVID. Um,
Right.
so
Totally.
yeah.
Well, Tim, thanks for all that you're doing with young adults and students. And this was a fascinating conversation. I love talking about this stuff. And yeah, we should do it again.
Oh, classic water cooler talk. You let me know what Netflix show I need to watch, and I'll hop on for sure. I love talking about that stuff, and it's I appreciate you kind of taking it next level with kind of looking into it more. What millennials, social media, fascinating stuff. Very good water cooler talk for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us are maybe watching more than we would normally, for better or worse, in this
Yep.
time. But it's good to think theologically and socially about some of these things.
Yeah, there's definitely series that got traction only because it's quarantine. Looking at you, Tiger King, but there's other stuff that has just been out for a while that's finally getting some legs. So yeah, I agree.
Exactly. All
Mhm.
right, Tim. Well, we'll catch you soon, dude.
All right, catch you later.
See you later, man.